Okay, so I'm Lauren Wallace. I am the Certifications Department Manager at the Epstein Group. I am also the facilitator for the Atlanta Living Building Challenge Collaborative. And this is basically our kickoff event for the collaborative. It's existed for a few years and it just took us a while to kind of get things going, but we're glad to be here. So excited to be paired up with Georgia Tech for our first two events. And then also excited to have some really awesome guest speakers here tonight. The topic tonight, materials transparency. Hopefully you guys have heard a little bit of buzz out there in the industry about what's going on with the materials market, and hopefully we'll kind of shed a little bit more light on that. I'm gonna bring the lights down, if everyone's okay with that, so you guys can see the screen a little better. Set the mood. Okay, so let's get started. Like I said, Atlanta Collaborative, just getting started. This is our first event. Yay! If you guys didn't sign in, when you guys leave, if you wouldn't mind signing in at the table where there are refreshments. There is some continuing education that you can self-report that's connected to this lecture tonight. So if you have AIA or Lead AP, you can get at least an hour, hour and a half for tonight. And also connect with the collaborative so we can kind of tell you guys what's going on. So if you're not familiar with Living Building Challenge, there are collaborative facilitators and then also ambassadors. So right now the collaborative is basically, the steering committee is myself, Jonna Keller, who you'll hear from later on tonight, and then Mariana Moores. And the three of us work for Epstein Group, and we've been reaching out to people to get some more people involved in the collaborative, involved in the steering committee, and hopefully over the next two events we'll have some more involvement. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we post most of our events to Facebook, but then we're also connecting with a few other organizations like AIA, USGBC Georgia, and obviously Georgia Tech to help get out the word too. So hopefully you guys should be able to see the events that are going on. Okay, so now why we're all here. So materials in the current marketplace. So since its adoption in 2000, the LEED rating system has brought a lot of attention to the topics of VOC, off-gassing, indoor air quality. So by now we're all a little familiar with exactly what's going on with some of the indoor air quality issues that we'll be talking about tonight. So, VOCs, for example, that, nice fancy plastic designer furniture and the new adhesives and fresh paint that go into a new building, they give that new building smell. I think we're all very familiar with. So, as designers and consultants, we care about the presence of VOCs within the building envelope, fleshing out the building in order to reduce those initial VOCs, and then ensuring that the VOCs are present in smaller quantities based on the South Coast Air Quality Management District guidelines. But now there's a shift in the materials marketplace demanding transparency, and we're here today to shed a little light on the subject matter. So the Living Building Challenge and LEED version 4 rating systems are basically starting to focus more industry attention on building material ingredients and how those materials affect human health. So in order to talk about where we are today, I'm actually going to give a bit of history. So in 1984, the World Health Organization Committee reported that up to 30% of new and remodeled buildings were the subject of excessive complaints related to indoor air quality, which is better known as the sick building syndrome. So major research went into how and why buildings were making people sick. Chemical contaminants were identified as volatile organic compounds, such as secondhand tobacco smoke, formaldehyde, high-volume copy machines, and concentrated cleaning products. There were outdoor sources, such as outdoor air intakes located next to congested freeways that are basically just pumping vehicle exhaust directly into the buildings. And last but not least, we were basically incubating moldy buildings by allowing water and humidity to collect and become stagnant. So thus came ASHRAE 62, which basically demanded adequate ventilation for buildings. So we needed to allow buildings to off-gas before they were occupied. We made a move to increase the ventilation rates while controlling the humidity, and we know better than to allow a school building to sit unconditioned through the dead heat of the summer. But we're not done. So our buildings are still making people sick. In recent news, you guys may have heard this story. Doctors have linked repeat accounts of a rare form of cancer in young women who coincidentally all play soccer and are all soccer goalies. So the culprit, they believe, are recycled rubber tires. So now within the sustainable building industry, we've basically been working to solve the landfill issue as a part of it, and tires that never degrade are being recycled and turned into new material. So fantastic, right? Except those tires are composed of 49 different chemicals, 7 of which are known carcinogens. So these carcinogens, they're being turned into plastic grass and playgrounds that are more durable. And the worst part is that this isn't necessarily new information. So it turns out a 2007 Environmental and Human Health Inc. study of tire crumbs and rubber mulch identified off-gassing and leaching of at least 4 known carcinogens. So why are we still specifying rubber for playgrounds, athletic fields, gardens, etc.? I'm not sure. But this is why we need transparency. This is where the market's moving. And it's moving towards transparency with a small step that's needed in order to develop new analytical procedures. So there's some things that you'll hear about tonight. One in particular is green screen for safer chemicals method. And it's basically hopefully going to help manufacturers and designers alike understand the possible connection between product ingredients and a range of different health issues. So these tools will hopefully help identify inherently safer alternatives. And what we really need is we need manufacturers to partner with us, help us with the transparency movement. So you'll hear from Mohawk later tonight, who's going to talk about their role and where they come from as manufacturers. So we need knowledgeable chemists to help designers avoid compounds that make us sick and to tell manufacturers which compounds can be used instead. We need rating systems like LEED, demanding change like the Living Building Challenge and Vision 2020 to continue to push the boundaries, and like the Well Building Standard to focus on human wellness within the built environment. So, here to talk about changes in the Materials and Resources Suite and LEED version 4, the most current version of the rating system, is Pete Choquette. Pete is the Design and Consulting Department Manager with the Epstein Group. Then we'll hear from Jonna Keller. Jonna Keller is the Architect and Project Manager with the Epstein Group, who will introduce us to the imperatives included in the materials petal of the Living Building Challenge. And then also joining us this evening is Justin Fry with the Mohawk Group, who will, in combination with Jonna, discuss a little bit about the materials petal aspects of the Mohawk Design Studio project in Dalton, Georgia, that's currently attempting petal certification. And last but not least, Rochelle Rotman from the Mohawk Group will talk more about transparency, what Mohawk has already accomplished, and as I said before, where we need more manufacturers to get on board. And I'm going to turn it over to Pete. Again, thank you all so much for being here. Hope you enjoy.
Good evening, everybody. How are you today? Tonight, I should say. In order to get going, we wanted to start with an overview of how material transparency is treated in the LEED rating system, given that it's kind of the 2,000-pound gorilla of green building rating systems in the industry right now. And specifically look at how it's being approached in LEED version 4. There is a 3-credit suite in LEED version 4 for building product disclosure and optimization that is extremely controversial right now and represents a dynamic change in the LEED rating system. The credits that are in this 3-credit suite are for environmental product declarations, sourcing of raw materials, and material ingredients, which is the credit that we'll spend the most time on in tonight's presentation. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about some background of what's changing and why in the LEED version 4 rating system, and why such a radical change to the materials and resources credit category was necessary. One reason is that to date, the LEED rating system has really only treated the environmental impacts of building materials in very rudimentary ways based on assumptions. If a material is high in recycled content, but if a material is extracted within 500 miles and manufactured within 500 miles, then it must be sustainable. But that's not necessarily true. What I like to show is kind of the sustainability version of the old algebra problem. If a train leaves from Albuquerque and is moving west, and another train leaves from Phoenix and is going right, at what point will they pass each other or collide, depending on how risque your professor or your teacher was. So in this case, the sustainability version of it is, if you have aluminum siding that's made from recycled aluminum and it's shipped from 400 miles away by air, is it really more environmentally responsible than non-FSC cedar wood siding shipped from 600 miles away by rail? I know which of those two problems in the older versions of the LEED rating system are going to contribute to more LEED points, but they're not necessarily the ones that are going to be the most environmentally responsible. The second point that I wanted to touch on is we need to understand that when it comes to sustainability, there's no such thing as a perfect building material. All materials have strengths and weaknesses when it comes to sustainability. That wood siding is excellent in terms of it has very low embodied energy and it sequesters carbon, but it also is often less durable and requires more maintenance than other potential material selections. So in that way, it's less sustainable. It's not a perfect material, because there is none. The third point then is, I want to talk about greenwashing, which is one of the things that LEED version 4 is attempting to address when it comes to the new materials and resources credit category. And when you say greenwashing, I think there's a misperception in the industry that a lot of times greenwashing is out and out fabrications by the materials industry. But that's not necessarily true. What often happens instead is material manufacturers spin what are the positive aspects of their material from a sustainability standpoint and omit what the negative impacts are. So for instance, there's a wonderful ad from the concrete industry that concrete is the sustainable choice, and they Photoshop the concrete green, so therefore it must be green. And they say concrete is highly durable, requires very little maintenance, and can have a reasonably high percentage of recycled content, fly ash. All that is completely true. There's not a single lie in that. What they fail to mention, though, is that the production of Portland cement is one of the largest sources of CO2 emissions in the world. So, again, it's not a perfect material from a sustainability standpoint, and there is a lot of confusion in the industry because material manufacturers don't necessarily disclose what the negative impacts will be. We also have to forgive ourselves as designers if we take a step back and understand that there are other criteria that we have to deal with when we're building a building. First, structural characteristics, what the costs of materials are, what the aesthetic impacts that we're trying to achieve with our material selections, even things like what the fire rating materials are. And understand that wood siding and framing may be an excellent selection for a low-rise multifamily project, but it's probably going to be inappropriate for a federal courthouse. So towards that end, we really need to build up tools so that we can understand what are the positive and negative sustainability characteristics of our materials, and so that we can make informed selections when we go ahead and design a project. Towards that end, there's the building product disclosure and optimization suite of credits, and the credit that we're going to talk most about tonight is the material ingredients credit. This is the most controversial of a otherwise completely controversial 3 credit suite. This one is actually banned by the South Carolina legislature by law. You can't do it on a state project in South Carolina already, even though LEED version 4 isn't going to go fully into effect until 2016, so that should let you know how much they love it. The intent is to encourage the use of products, materials, for which life cycle information is available, and that have environmentally, economically, and socially preferable life cycle impacts, to reward project teams for selecting products for which the chemical ingredients in the product are inventoried using an accepted methodology, and for selecting products verified to minimize the use and generation of harmful substances. And last but not least, to reward raw material manufacturers who produce products verified to have improved life cycle impacts. So before we get into how the credit, what the credit actually addresses in terms of its technical criteria, it's important to point out that each one of the credits in this 3-credit suite has the same structure. Each one is worth 1 to 2 points, and the first point is for participation in the material transparency program. It isn't necessarily for achieving any particular performance factor, but merely for participating in the program. If you have 20 materials from 5 manufacturers, then you will earn that point for whatever the transparency criteria is for that particular credit. So you can't have 20 materials that have been reported from 1 manufacturer, you have to have it from at least 5. With that view of LEED's overall idea of having market transformation, trying to prompt as many companies as possible to participate in material transparency reporting. The second point then is for installing a certain percentage of materials by cost that meet optimization criteria, that actually meet certain performance thresholds in order to make the building more sustainable. And then there's some extra factors that get piled on top of that. So for the first point, is the building product third-party verified, or is it product specific? That will change the factor to the degree of how much a particular product will count. Does it count for 1? Does it count for 1.5? There's even one where it counts for 1/4. And then the second point can be altered by if it's a locally sourced material, it can count double in terms of its value. So if it's harvested, manufactured, and distributed from within 100 miles of your project site, it counts double. But you're only allowed to have 30% of your value come from enclosure and structure. And that last rule is in particular to try and prompt finishes manufacturers to participate heavily in these programs and to have more of a part of the mix in achieving LEED credits. So the materials and ingredients credit has 3 main components to it, the last 2 of which combine together. The first is ingredient reporting. This is the first point where you have to use at least 20 different permanently installed materials from at least 5 manufacturers that use one of the following chemical inventory methods. So the first is having a publicly published manufacturer inventory where you have to publish all of your ingredient names as well as your chemical abstract service registry numbers. And that has to be out in the public. Now there are provisions that are made within the LEED credit which allows any ingredients that are deemed to be trade secrets, they can be withheld. But you have to disclose what that ingredient's role, amount, and what its green screen benchmark is. And we'll get into a little bit later what the green screen program is about. The second way that you can show compliance with this credit is to participate in a health product declaration, to have a health product declaration for your material. And then the third one is to have a cradle-to-cradle certification that is either cradle-to-cradle basic or cradle-to-cradle version 3 silver certification or better. And again, later on in the presentation, we'll talk about some of the specifics of those individual programs. So if you have 20 materials from 5 different manufacturers that meet one of those criteria, then you get the first point. The second point comes from the next 2 elements which you can actually combine. The first is for ingredient optimization. You have to use products that document their material ingredient optimization using any one of the following 2 paths for at least 25% of their total cost. So if a building goes through a green screen method and it goes through the list translator, which is a less in-depth chemical analysis, you get to count 1 time the value of that material towards compliance with this credit. If you go through a full assessment though, you get to count 1.5 times its value towards the credit. Or you can do cradle-to-cradle certification. If you do version 2 gold or version 3 silver certification for that material, you get to count 1 times its value. If you get version 2 platinum or version 3 gold or platinum certification under the cradle-to-cradle certification system, for that material, and you get to count 1.5 times its value. And again, products harvested, manufactured, and distributed within 100 miles. You can then count twice that value towards the particular credit compliance. The other way to go about getting the second point then is supply chain optimization, which is using building products where at least 25% by cost have supply chain that has been third-party verified to have robust safety, health, hazard, and risk programs in place, as well as sustainability policies in place as well. And you can actually combine those two elements together in order to get to your 25% value. In order to get that second point, again, though only 30% may come from your structure or enclosure. And the important thing to note is you can't double count a material. So the material is cradle-to-cradle certified and it has robust supply chain policies in place. You can only count it once towards this credit. So those are the summary of the 3 compliance paths that you have in this particular credit. Material ingredient reporting being the first point, and then you can combine the last 2, material ingredient optimization and or product manufacturer supply chain optimization, in order to get the second point. Now, at this particular point in the presentation, you're thinking, my gosh, I probably need to get a certified public accountant to start working on my projects in order to total up and put all these factors and multipliers on my material costs in order to earn these points. And why is this important? Because this seems like an awful lot of extra effort for a building. Well, the reason is because, according to the EPA, Americans spend approximately 90% of their time indoors. So our buildings and our indoor environments have a disproportionate effect on our health and welfare as human beings. And we need to understand that there are about 85,000 chemicals that are commonly used in our building products and our building materials, of which 96% of them have never been tested in order to determine what their impacts on human health are, which is kind of a scary number. And what should be even scarier to you is the 4% that we have tested, there's a few of them that we know are toxic and have negative impacts on human health, and we're still using them. So what we're trying to do in the LEED version 4 rating system is have this credit seek to reward manufacturers that put in place processes for continuous improvement and really try to be transparent with their materials and reporting what the potential health impacts of them may be, with a view towards allowing designers to have fully informed decisions of what materials they're going to use on their products or on their buildings. Some of the programs that I mentioned earlier on, health product declarations, these sound like EPDs, if you've heard of EPDs, which are environmental product declarations, but they are not the same. Health product declarations are a voluntary program where manufacturers are encouraged but not required to divulge all of the ingredients that they use in their products. Companies may exclude at their discretion chemical ingredients in their particular products for proprietary reasons. Manufacturers must divulge any ingredients in their products that are on any one of 3 major lists of ingredients that are potentially harmful to human health. And HPDs, as I mentioned, they utilize an open source voluntary compliance standard. Most people who participate in this program are in it for altruistic reasons, and it's a fairly decent program from that respect. But you can see there is some margin for abuse here, where manufacturers can claim that they have trade secrets, and that's the reason that they don't want to divulge what a particular chemical ingredient is in their product. And sometimes that happens to be that they're slipping in something like a halogenated flame retarder, which is bad for your reproductive system, and you would have no way of knowing it because that's allowed under a health product declaration. Green screen method then is, green screen for safer chemicals, is a method of assessing products through chemical hazard assessment. It relies on benchmarks which weigh the combined hazard concerns of different chemical ingredient combinations. So this is a little bit different also from the health product declaration from the standpoint of we're also looking at how different chemicals interact together in order to create combinations of chemicals and how they affect your health. A more cursory comparison in green screen is done through the green screen list translator. That's the one that's worth 1 times the value. It's not an exhaustive, complete screening of the product. A full assessment of the product's ingredients requires a full green screen assessment by a third-party verifier, and that's worth 1.5 times the product's value towards the LEED credit. The last of the programs that I mentioned was Cradle to Cradle certification, which was developed by architect William McDonough, obviously along with chemist Michael Brongard, with feedback from many of the world's leading manufacturing brands. It covers not just building materials, but there are also fashion brands that are covered by this. A lot of furniture manufacturers go through Cradle to Cradle certification. And materials are given scores of basic, bronze, silver, gold, or platinum in 5 different categories. Material health, material reutilization, renewable energy and carbon management, water stewardship, and social fairness, from which then a weighted score is given for the material as a whole. It's unique in that it extends beyond the manufacturing process to how a material is used at the end of its lifespan and how manufacturers actually go about doing business. It requires a balance of the 3 elements of sustainability: environmental, economic, and social systems. And because it's a multi-category labeling system, it attempts to be an all-encompassing eco-label, unlike environmental product declarations, which are really informational. Cradle to Cradle is actually attempting to say, this is a good product for the environment. You should use it because it's Cradle to Cradle certified. So that makes it a little bit different. So that's an overview of LEED version 4, chemical transparency in that particular rating system. I'm now going to hand it over to Johnny Keller, who's going to talk a little bit about the materials pedal and the Living Building Challenge program. And specifically, I'm sure she'll have a lot to say about the red list. So, John.
Hi, I'm Jonna. I'm going to talk about the Living Building Challenge's take on materials transparency and its effect on human health. So to start with, I'm going to talk a little bit about the materials pedal as a pedal category with its 5 imperatives, the intent of which is to help create a materials economy that is non-toxic, ecologically regenerative, transparent, and socially equitable. Building materials are responsible for many adverse environmental issues throughout their life cycle, including personal illness, habitat and species loss, pollution, and resource depletion. The imperatives in the materials pedal aim to remove the worst known offending materials and practices and to drive business towards a truly responsible materials economy. However, impacts can only be reduced, not eliminated. Therefore, the LBC deems that there is an obligation not only to offset the damaging consequences associated with the construction process, but also to strive for corrections in the industry itself. At the present time, like Pete said, it's kind of impossible to gauge the true environmental impact and toxicity of the built environment due to a lack of product level information. Although the LBC does continue to shine a light on the need for transformative industrial practices. The materials pedal, the underlying theme of the materials pedal is sort of the precautionary principle. It's the better safe than sorry approach. And the red list is a perfect example of the precautionary principle. It comprises some of the worst in class materials and chemicals that are ubiquitous in the built environment. They are carcinogens, persistent organic pollutants, and reproductive toxicants, many of which are bioaccumulative, meaning that they build up in organisms and the broader environment as they travel up the food chain. This imperative prohibits the use of these 22 chemicals within living building projects. Some of the more obvious ones might be asbestos and lead, but then there are other chemicals and materials like chlorinated plastics, halogenated flame retardants, VOCs, wood preservatives, that kind of thing, that are in pretty much every building material or product. For instance, cadmium is a heavy metal used in paints and electronics and to stabilize PVC. It's a carcinogen and is toxic to the kidney, lung, and placenta. Chlorinated plastics, and I'm not a chemist, so I'm going to try to say these sort of technical chemical names, so forgive me. But so there are several chlorinated plastics like chlorinated polyethylene, chlorosulfonated polyethylene, or polychloroprene, which is also known as chloroprene rubber. These go by the brand names of Tyrene, Hypalon, and neoprene, are all associated with life cycle dioxin releases resulting from manufacturing processes and combustion. Dioxins belong to the so-called dirty dozen, which is a group of dangerous chemicals known as persistent organic pollutants. Dioxins are highly toxic and cause reproductive and developmental problems, damage the immune system, interfere with hormones, and also cause cancer. These chlorinated plastics are used in things like additives to PVC in windows, pipes, and cables, single-ply roofing membranes, geomembranes, and other coated fabrics. They're also used in adhesives, gaskets, hot tar flashings, expansion joint filler, and other coatings. So it's pretty much in everything we use. It should be noted that cost-competitive substitute materials with equal or even superior performance attributes are available for most of these applications, like T-Brain or HDPE. Another red list chemical, halogenated flame retardants, are formulated in fabrics, foams, and various other plastics to reduce, of course, flammability. HFRs are a persistent bioaccumulative toxin, which means that they grow as they travel up the food chain, and disrupt thyroid and estrogen hormones, which can cause developmental disorders, including brain and reproductive system damage. Phthalates are commonly used in vinyl building materials like flooring and wall coverings to make them flexible and durable. It is believed that some phthalates may adversely affect human reproduction and development. Wood treatments like coal tar creosote is widely used as a wood preservative in the US, and it's a probable human carcinogen. Inorganic arsenic has known skin, respiratory, nervous system, and carcinogenic effects. Pentachlorophenol has been heavily used in the US for utility poles, fence posts, and similar products. It can also be found a little bit in log houses, furniture, boats, that kind of thing, but has been banned for the most part since 1984. It volatilizes from wood-treated products and off gases with increased temperatures. It's a probable human carcinogen and linked to liver and immune system damage. So these are bad, bad things. Diving deeper into the LBC's red list, this seemingly simple list of 22 chemicals actually represents 45 chemical groups with multiple aliases, accounting for 777 distinct chemical CAS numbers, or CAS numbers. I've actually heard both. To be clear, because ingredients are sometimes hidden behind an alias, often the only way to determine if a chemical is in the red list is by CAS number. Those numbers are a unique numerical identifier assigned by the Chemical Abstract Service for nearly every known chemical, compound, or organic substance, and are a very effective and transparent way to evaluate building product ingredients, and often a really great way to communicate with manufacturers about what is actually on the red list. So, how do we find out what chemicals are in our building products? We can look at material safety data sheets, which are required by OSHA for all products. They're designed to address occupational safety and provide sort of a bare bones assessment. The problem is that what manufacturers are required to report is pretty minimal, so disclosure levels are all over the map. The good news is that when they do disclose the ingredients, it's by CAS number, which then I can compare to the red list. There's environmental product declarations, which provide, as Pete was talking, they provide information about environmental impacts of a product over its life cycle, including the list of ingredients and where the materials come from, However, it may not include much detail, and certainly not the ingredients of the ingredients for more complex systems. Health product declarations, again, as Pete already covered, sort of just provide information about the health impacts of a product and requires the manufacturers to explicitly state this level of ingredient disclosure, which is nice. And then they have to provide a hazard profile for ingredients that are hazardous. They do, however, identify ingredients by CAS number. Cradle to cradle is another option, as Pete went into detail. It includes a material health quality category and identify ingredients and chemical hazards with potential threats to human health and the environment. So C2C products under version 2 with a material health score of gold or platinum, or products certified under version 3, anything basically above basic, are likely to comply with the red list. It goes through a similar protocol as the red list, and they're inventory to at least 100 ppm. However, since Cradle to Cradle has no public disclosure requirement, we must really actually request manufacturers fully disclose ingredients and get written confirmation that the products do not include any red list materials or chemicals. Which brings me to Declare, which was developed by the International Living Futures Institute and is designed to meet the needs of the LBC. It's a transparency-driven ingredients label and product database. Manufacturers sort of declare what ingredients are in the products. It's designed to be simple and an attractive way for manufacturers to fully disclose the ingredients of their products. To date, there are 115 products in the Declare database, which Mohawk will probably talk more about. As you may suspect, items on the red list, I'm going to zoom out to the thing. As you may suspect, items on the red list are commonly found in a lot of building products. There may be instances when products, one, like do not comply with LBC's red list imperative, and a compliant red list free alternative can't be found, or manufacturers aren't willing to disclose all the ingredients, like proprietary or second tier supplied ingredients, or authorities having jurisdiction require a specific product that includes a red list ingredient, such as PVC and wiring applications. In these cases, the LBC requires performing due diligence to put forth a genuine effort to exclude any red list products. For instance, searching for red list free alternatives outside of the appropriate zoning, sourcing zone, or requesting a variance from the authority having jurisdiction. And it also requires advocacy in the form of letters for the transparency of all material ingredients and the elimination of red list materials and chemicals. And in many ways, it's these due diligence and advocacy efforts that form the bulk of the red list imperative and the LBC's driving force behind materials transparency. To give a brief overview of the real-world application of the red list is Justin Fry, who's going to talk to us about the new design studio for Mohawk, which is pursuing pedal certification.
Thank you, Jonna. This is my counterpart here. My name is Justin Fry, and I'm here to talk about a really exciting project that we're working on. I'm a carpet designer with Mohawk Industries. I know very little about what you do. I design carpet and products. One thing I do know is that we spend a lot of time putting energy into beautiful products. We want to see those products on the floor. When we go out, we want to see those products. So I'm really excited to know that I work with a company that's working to make all of our products Declare level certified. This guy right here represents me. I'm an ambassador for the Living Building Challenge. I've gone through the formal training, and I'm pretty dangerous, but I don't know a whole lot. I don't have a formal education. I really, like they said, an ambassador serves as someone who can have an informal conversation to begin to spark interest for those who want to dig deeper. The Living Building Challenge, if you don't know this already, it's really a collaborative. So it is an ever-moving, or should I say evolving target. So you really have to be involved to know what's going on. Another main reason I'm here is because if you look up top here, you'll see one building, you look bottom, you'll see another. On the top, that is our showroom in Dalton, Georgia, which has been relocated to Calhoun. And as a result, this beautiful empty space has opened up. Currently, our design center resides just adjacent to this building on the same site. It's actually in the dark. We're kind of sad to admit it. So when we noticed that this building had floor-to-ceiling windows all the way around the building, mountains, it's on top of a hill, beautiful mountains and trees, we were very excited to maybe get to move into this space. So what we did was we reached out to Savannah College of Art and Design, and we collaborated with them to come up with some interior design options for the building. At this point in time, the project was really all about aesthetics and functionality for the users and the occupants. The title of the project was The Light Lab, primarily because our most important feature is the new opportunity to have so much light in the space. In our building in Dalton, our design team, we have 3 interior designers. So we brought the plans in and we really started to get a little more practical with the great idea that SCAD gave us. And as you can see, for example, we retained some of the plan from SCAD, but we started to make some adjustments for practical reasons, as I'm sure you're all aware of. I'll give you a detail about the project. We haven't hired an architecture firm per se. We did hire the Epstein Group to do most of the work that we need to do. But we have our own internal architecture teams and our own internal construction staff. So our project is unique in that sense. It gives us a nice advantage, and that we have more control over than many of you will have in some of your projects. This is our interior plan. And what we started to do, we were all excited about this floor because we're a floor covering manufacturer. We realized we had an opportunity to source multiple materials. Obviously, we were going to go with our products that are most sustainable in the floor because we want to celebrate that. We want to talk about how sustainable we are as a transparent company. So we were going through our declare labels and we were working through and trying to decide which products we want to do. And then we said, wait a minute, we can do more than this. We talk about this. We're actually the customers here. We're the client. Let's make this entire building a certified building in the Living Building Challenge. So this was the first opportunity in the Southeast. We registered under version 2.1 and we got started. Quickly thereafter, we had a charrette at Green Prince. It was hosted by South Face last year. We got the opportunity to work with many professionals, I'd say about 100 professionals, where we took the different petals of the Living Building Challenge and we took the scope of our project and we handed it out and we said, how can we get full certification? So about an hour later, we had collaborated to come up with concepts and ideas to do that. We then took those concepts and ideas back to Dalton, the greatest place on earth, by the way. And along with that, we brought the Epstein Group, whom we decided to hire to take it to a more finer point. The Epstein Group came down, and also the International Living Future Institute came from Seattle. We hired them for a day of consulting, and they helped us really kind of crack through some of the confusions that we might have had since they are the source. And what we ended up landing on were almost five petals, I should say. Materials, site, equity, beauty, and I'm going to say a partial health because we're focusing on biophilia. There are more petals. Some of the other petals we were not able to do. A lot of the reason being this is a renovation, and I hate to make excuses for it, but everyone is familiar with this. We're building a foundation to achieve these in the future. So that's one thing we're looking forward to with this program. That's one thing that the Living Building Challenge does that they accommodate very well. I'm going to start talking about repurposed materials first because that has really helped us get through the projects a lot. We have a facility in Dublin, Georgia, that unfortunately has been closed, but it's loaded with materials. So what we've done is we've trucked those materials from Dublin, Georgia to Dalton, Georgia, and we have them in a warehouse. And we're using those company-wide when we do build-outs. As you can see, this beautiful wood here, it's aged wood, and what we're going to use that for in the building is anytime we need wood, and don't tell our construction guys because they're not excited about all the pre-drilling and everything, but we're excited about the look and feel. We're going to expose the beam from the ceiling as they radiate out. Some other things we're going to use the wood for is our kitchen cabinets. We're going to design that wood. And any leftover wood we have from the project, since the building is a 360-degree view of trees, we're going to use our leftover paint and wood to build birdhouses and put them out there. These are little details that we're really excited about. If you look here, you'll see a drawer pull. This is a small detail, but to us it's green, and it points to our bottle flake facility in Somerville, Georgia, which is the largest bottle flake facility where we crush Mountain Dew bottles and Dream bottles to create polymer. It's the largest one in North America. So we're just going to use that resin, and the design team, we're going to create our own little molds out of wood, and then we're going to create some drawer pulls. Sorry, I'm really excited about design. So I could go on and on and on about this because we've really come up with some great ways to repurpose materials due to the limitations that we've seen sourcing new materials. And I'll go into new materials now. Oh wait, one more cool thing. I got to tell you this one. We wanted to take the bottles and build a chandelier. So everyone, we're collecting our own bottles, and we're going to build a beautiful art piece in the center of the building. And to give it a little bling, the mirrors in the bathroom, which we're not replacing, we're actually just giving the bathroom a facelift. They have some water damage across the bottom, so we're going to cut that out, and then we're going to slice those up and put them back to back and use them as some nice reflective elements in the chandelier. Sorry, had to go. We're working with Ecos Paints. They make VOC eating paint. It's got a Declare label on it as well. And if you're not familiar with their paint, it's a very, very interesting paint. You might want to research it. We're using it to do our ceiling, and we'll use it for any surface we have. I want to talk about new materials really quickly. What we did when we got started, John was my counterpart most of the time in this project. Thank you, John. We had already built a lead building in Calhoun, Georgia for our corporate headquarters. The one I mentioned earlier, they took the showroom materials. And during that build out, we had acquired a nice list of materials. So we figured, since we had already procured those and our contractors were familiar with the vendors, and we would just start there. So we had a list that was about 3 feet long of materials. We started hammering through that, and John started diligently looking for materials that had the information we needed to check that box. And we've probably worked through, I'd say, about 20% of the list. And it's been tough because manufacturers don't want to share information, and you can understand why. And that's, I want to bring Rochelle to talk about that. It's been really tough for us, even with our own corporation, to convince the powers that be to share our potentially secret sauce with everyone. We value the importance of declaring that we are a transparent company, and that we can we can help to build buildings where the occupants are not worried about what's in this building. We don't want things to happen down the line that we feel guilty for. So I'll introduce my colleague, Rochelle Routman, who is our Director of Sustainability. She's the real expert.
We're going to turn the lights up just a little bit because I have a few examples of Declare labels. Thank you, Justin. That was fantastic. I actually hadn't seen a picture of those drawer pools, so that was great. Alrighty, so let's talk about the importance of transparency from a corporate perspective. So most people can relate to ingredients labels on food products. I don't know if we always pay attention to what we read or how that affects our choices, but I guess when I first started working for Mohawk, it's going to be almost 3 years by now, when I met with architects and designers all over the country, they started talking about product transparency and how important this was to them. In fact, that's what I heard on my 3rd week of the job. I met with somebody with one of the largest architectural firms in the world called Gensler up in Washington, D.C., and that was what they started talking to me about. And then I said, well, where are you coming from with this? And they started telling me about the Living Building Challenge. I said, well, how do I find that standard? And they said, well, all you have to do is just go to the web and you can print it off. And I was thinking, you mean you don't have to pay $150, to look at that? And I was so intrigued by all this that it really set me into creating a whole new direction for Mohawk. And this is our philosophy. We want open communication with the public. We want to be able to share ingredients information. We don't want to have to go through a third party or an intermediary. We would prefer instead to have that one-on-one conversation with our customers. And we also want to share transparency information transparently. And that may seem like, well, that would just be the natural thing to do, but it really isn't, because there's a lot of companies out there saying that they're transparent, but in fact, you have to ask them for ingredient data, maybe in the form of a handwritten letter or something like that. It's nowhere to be found when you actually go to ask for it. So that's certainly not the way we want to approach transparency. And we are so involved in this that we now have over 370 red list free flooring products, along with our Flex Lock. It's a carpet installation system. I mean, this is really unheard of. We have so many customers now that are coming up to us, and they just cannot believe that Mohawk has been able to accomplish so much. And I actually have some of our Declare labels. Maybe I thought it would be a good idea to just pass these around, and you guys can see what an actual Declare label looks like. And we have 19 of those now. We just got 7 more last week that would cover our hospitality products for hotels and motels and casinos and that sort of thing. And we also have 6 health product declarations, which is also highly unusual for a flooring company. Most companies, if they have 1, they're doing really good, but we have 6, and we also have 3 environmental product declarations. Now, I do want to mention that, this is a continuing, evolving effort, and so we will have more of these products covered. So, in terms of all of these red list free Mohawk products, what all does this include? We made an amazing discovery that all of our carpet tile can actually be made and be red list free if we use a non-PVC backing. And Mohawk is a large enough company that we can offer both. We actually see more of our product migrating towards the non-PVC red list free carpet backing as more and more of our customers learn about this and they become more educated. And that's really the whole purpose of transparency. I mean, we think about how it affected the nutrition industry and the food industry. And the same is going to happen with building products. As people learn more and understand more, they will make more informed decisions, and that will in effect, transform the economy. So we have also discovered that all of our broadloom carpet, which is simply carpet on rolls, that is also all red list free. And so you may be wondering, well, gosh, why is Mohawk doing this? So we are doing it, first of all, because it is the right thing to do. We have nothing to hide, and we fully support and believe in product transparency. We have a process at Mohawk. We have this very well integrated now. I'm working very closely with our R&D team. We have these various external partners. UL actually has a branch, UL Environment, and they do third-party certification of our EPDs and also our recycled content in our carpet. We're also working with the HPD Collaborative on the HPDs. And there's James, he is with the International Living Future Institute, and they are overseeing the Declare effort. And I just wanted to show you some photographs. And I also wanted to see if there are any questions out there about the Declare labels at this point. Have you guys had a chance to take a look at those? Okay. Do we have any questions? Does anybody see one that has any red listed ingredients? Okay. Okay, so there's one person here that has, okay. So this makes it pretty easy, right? You can see which ingredients are actually red listed chemicals. And I do want to make the point that, Mohawk is being very open with all of our ingredients and all of our products. We're not just cherry picking the best of the best. We're doing declare labels on all of our products. And again, this is a pretty radical notion for a corporation. So this is a woven product, and this is really the earliest type of carpet construction, and it can last for up to 25 years, and these are all red list free, all of our woven products. This is our broadloom, and all of our broadloom products are also red list free. And here is one of the tile products, and this might resemble one of the declare labels. And these are the two polymers shown here that make PVC, which is a red list chemical. And PVC is kind of a controversial red list chemical because a lot of people say, well, gosh, once it's in the product, there really isn't any harm. But the Living Building Challenge does look at that chemical throughout its entire life cycle. And so that's really the argument there. And you can see here, if it has a red list chemical, then the label will show declared versus if it's red list free. Now you may be wondering, well gosh, what does that block mean, Living Building Challenge compliant? So if a company proposes that one of the red list chemicals is actually a required ingredient and there's not currently an option available in the market, then they can get this temporary Living Building Challenge compliance status. That's one way. Another way, sometimes companies say that it's necessary for them to claim a proprietary exemption. Mohawk only has Living Building Challenge red list free and declared. We're not claiming any proprietary exemptions. Here is one of our beautiful carpet tile products that is red list free, and this is an off-the-shelf product. This is the Flex Lock. Who here has the Flex Lock declare label? Okay, great. Okay, in the back. So do you notice anything unique, like maybe the very few number of ingredients, right? Four ingredients, that's it. And this works really well with our non-PVC carpet tile. So the two together just make a really great sustainable choice in flooring. And I know a couple people tonight said that they've been to the Bullitt Center, like Dagmar, right? Maybe a couple other people. So this is viewed as the most sustainable or greenest commercial building in the world. And this is the home of the International Living Future Institute. So they have their office there. And we're very excited that Mohawk Carpet is installed here. This is Ground Strata 2 Modular, that's the name of the style. And there's a living wall in the room. And here's the declare label that goes with that product. And this actually was one of the main reasons why Mohawk kind of got so involved in this whole red list free emphasis, because there was a designer at the Bullitt Center and she wanted this product, but we did not know that we could do it as a red list free product, and we tried to encourage her to select another product that already had a declare label, and she said, no way, I want this one. And so that started the wheels turning at Mohawk, and it just happened. We discovered that we could do any of these carpet tiles on a red list free carpet backing, and the entire carpet would be red list free. And most recently, this is a wonderful program. You guys should learn about it. It's called the Seed Collaborative. And there's a woman named Stacy Smedley, and she decided that she wanted her kids to be in Living Building Challenge classrooms, because she was concerned in particular about her children being exposed to hazardous chemicals in portable classrooms. And so she started this movement, and now these buildings are being built across the United States, and this is one of Justin's designs here, this wonderful mosaic. And the reason it looks like that is because the children said that they wanted their flooring to look as the image appears when they look out of the window in an airplane. So that was Justin's interpretation. It's great. And okay, so without accessibility, you cannot have transparency, because you have to be able to provide people with a tool to get to all these documents. And so Green Wizard is that tool. This is really a fantastic search tool. It's kind of like eBay for building products. And our customers can quickly search according to whatever sustainability criteria they're interested in. If it's recycled content, if they want red list free, if they want declared. And by the way, this is a free program. So you might want to check out greenwizard.com and see how easy it is to search for products. So I'm wanting to just close with a little discussion about how Mohawk has become so intertwined with the International Living Future Institute. And so I first heard somebody speak in a formal lecture on the Living Building Challenge in November of 2012 at Greenbuild, and that was in San Francisco. And it just struck me as something very, very important, and certainly something that Mohawk needed to be involved in. So after the presentation, I walked up to the speaker, who was he's former executive director of the Institute, and I said, "Hey, are you working with a flooring company?" And he said, "No, I'm not. Who are you?" So it started this conversation, and we had the folks from the Institute come and meet with the executives at Mohawk, and really within 6 months of the date when I first heard that presentation, Mohawk and the Institute formally committed to work together. And Mohawk first became an angel sponsor of the Institute, and this is what we did last year. We spent many days out on the road educating and connecting people all about the Living Building Challenge. We went to California, Texas, Florida, Toronto, Milwaukee, Minneapolis. It was just fantastic experience, and as a result of the Mohawk efforts, a new collaborative, just like what's being developed here in Atlanta, was created in Dallas. And this year, we are now a Gaia sponsor. Gaia meaning Mother Earth. She was from Greek mythology. And we are again going to have these events in these 4 locations this year. And it's very exciting that we're going to be able to build upon the model that we developed last year. So I just want to end here in a quote, how important it is to be fully involved in this transparency discussion in an honest way. And certainly a manufacturer says that they are being transparent, but they're not sharing information transparently, then it's not real. So think about that. And with that, I'll turn this back over to Lauren.
Thanks, guys. That basically wraps it up. Wanted to see if you guys had any questions. Hopefully you learned a lot. I know there's a lot of information that was kind of given to you guys today, and I know that I have specifically gotten into kind of the sustainability movement because it's another challenge that's added to the design aspect. It's obviously easy to start with a clean slate, but now there's all these other things that we have to think about. Like maybe I should have taken some more chemistry classes when I was in school here at Georgia Tech, and things of that nature, so that I understand what they're talking about when it comes to materials and the different chemicals that are basically probably going to expand upon on a list of chemicals that we should be concerned about. So Are there any questions for anyone?
I just have a question for Mohawk. Looking at your declare labels, and you also talked about how you have one that only has 4 pieces in it to make your product. Do you guys manufacture everything in Dalton for all of your products that are on the declare labels? So your polyethylene, your nylon, everything is manufactured by you? You guys don't have outside suppliers for that?
So the question being, I guess, what level of vertical integration do we have? So Mohawk is a vertically integrated company, and we do make our own fibers. So this does give us more control over our supply chain, yes. And by the way, I just want to mention, if you could please return the declare labels, so I'll have them for the next presentation. There you go.
Yeah, thanks again for bringing this.
Yeah.
Always fun to see.
Yeah, to bounce off that previous question, since the red list free designation requires disclosing everything down to 100 ppm, how did you convince your suppliers to do that? That's a really deep level.
Money talks.
So, it's kind of interesting because, right, when I first started talking about this within Mohawk, people were like saying, well, there's no way we can do this. So the first thing I did was I hired an 18-year-old intern to prove to everybody that we could do it. And he got like 75% of the information by calling the vendors. And not to make light of this, but Mohawk is a large company and we do have a lot of clout. And so by us asking, and maybe there might have been a little bit of concern with some of these suppliers, hey, if I don't give them the information, they might go to another supplier.
Yeah.
So that, I think, influenced their decision on whether or not they were going to give us the information. That we were able to accomplish it.
We started to walk out the door. Because it's important.
Well, and to add to that conversation too, I mean, hopefully just with this event tonight and as, the years kind of go by, more and more transparency conversations will happen. And hopefully more people will understand that this is kind of where the industry's headed, and we're going to be wanting to know a lot more information than they're willing to share. And status quo, I mean, they're going to have to, answer. So I think to kind of give a little bit of background, I always compare the Living Building Challenge to where it is that we want to be, and that LEED kind of straddles the supply and demand line. And so now that LEED in the latest rating system is asking for transparency too, hopefully that's that extra little, shove to get people where we want to be. Another question?
I was just wondering if you could elaborate, if you happen to have any suppliers that weren't quite as easy to convince, or if you had procurement involved, and how that process kind of went, and if there's any kind of tips and tricks besides being a big company and having a lot of supply and clout.
Yes, so the first part of the question, did we have any problem suppliers? And so the answer to that is yes, we do currently have a few, and they deal mostly with our resilient products that some of them we do not make, they are made in Asia. And that seems to be more of a difficult situation. However, the first Asian supplier did come through with their list of ingredients a couple months ago, and I think it's going to maybe impact the attitudes of the other suppliers. And I heard today, as a matter of fact, that one of the problem suppliers that was holding out put together a team of people, a transparency team, I just heard that today, to work with us and talk with us about our needs and transparency. So that was the first question. And then the second part, I'm sorry, was?
What if with those suppliers, if you got like procurement or other groups involved, and if that was kind of the way you went about it, or how did you go about dealing with those problem suppliers? Yes,
so really our R&D team has been involved in this because they're the ones that are developing the labels, and so our procurement folks have not been involved so much. It's really been the R&D team, and they have done a fantastic job. And so really I think what happened was once the intern was able to gather so much information that the guys in R&D that had been there for 20 or 30 years that first said to me, we can't do this, they changed their mind and then they got on board with the process. So they've been doing a great job. Thank you.
Anyway.
Go.
Yeah.
No.
I'm not sure if that's a question for Mohawk or perhaps somebody else, but going back to the red list free definition, so for example, in FDA defines something to be fat free if it's less than 0.5 grams per serving, or there's some rounding down going on. The 100 parts per million, what I heard, is that the across the board limit, or is it per chemical basis?
Yeah, it's across the board. And then if you, I don't know if you, saw during Pete's presentation, the lead rating system is asking for 1,000 parts per million. So it's definitely much more stringent under the Living Building Challenge. And I think as some of the manufacturers can attest to, 100 parts per million is very, very small. But absolutely right, yeah, there's some assumption being made.
But not being a chemist, I do know, however, that there are some chemicals that are very particular. Their limits are in the parts per billion range versus million, and that would change the whole picture quite a bit.
Absolutely.
I don't know if this is a fair question to ask a team of architects, designers, and industry professionals, but what about the situation of people who are in or using buildings that are not currently being renovated or that are not new building? Is there any process for recouping information about the materials that surround us every day, for example, in academia?
Is there a process for it?
What would someone do if they were in a building and wondered what materials were in it, but it wasn't currently undergoing renovation or new construction?
You mean materials that you can't see? Like insulation?
Or their carpets.
Just the carpets?
There's air quality testing.
Yeah, analytical.
You could do that. Like you just have a sample dish in the space and you just let it over time accumulate and it measures the pollutants in the air, which is most closely to what you would need.
Right, but that would be particulates that are actually like airborne, because you're just collecting air samples. I know that a lot of the different chemicals that have been talked about, specifically through the red list and others, it's, if there's any kind of heating up or cooling off, then sometimes that's when, particulates are released, or if you just kind of come in contact with it often. I think a good example is probably the AstroTurf, the recycled rubber pellets. They're actually being ingested. So at a certain point, but then the study that I showed from EHHI, they were saying that the different manufacturing plants where these tires are being made, that the people who are, in the manufacturing plants helping make the products, that they're experiencing all these different health effects. So I think it's probably pretty difficult to try and figure out what's there, and especially who made it. You can look at carpet unless you are able to talk to someone who helped design the building. You're not going to really know maybe who it came from. And then, the second aspect would be, well, which of these products are the ones that I need to be concerned about? And I think, it's very new to me, and I'm, this is what I deal with every day. So I think we all have a lot to learn. But maybe, hopefully we'll get there. And then, manufacturers will start freaking out.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that another, I think, aspect of air quality, indoor air quality that is often ignored are things that people bring into the workplace. And the Living Building Challenge does address this through the indoor air quality testing. But for example, air fresheners and things like that are really, in many cases, right, I see people that are like, yuck, right? They can be very toxic and they can cause all sorts of reactions, and these are common in workspaces. And so sometimes it's not even the products, but it's the activities and what people bring into the space.
Absolutely. Yes.
Question is not related to materials, but Mohawk also reports GRI, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so it's an entire company, Are you guys familiar with the Global Reporting Initiative? No? Do you want to talk a little bit about it? Okay.
If you're either way, it's just a universal way to report on environmental, economic, and social indicators for a large corporation.
Right, it's basically speaking to the social responsibility aspect, but there's a lot of environmental components that are involved, including trying to calculate your greenhouse gas, and your carbon footprint and water usage. Yeah, for the depending on, especially if you're a manufacturer.
Even child labor in Asia.
Yeah, child labor laws. Yeah. So it's very interesting. And actually, as a part of Living Building Challenge, there's a program called JUST, which is trying to speak to social responsibility. So I can go on and on about that all day if you guys want. But I know we're here to talk about materials. Yeah, we'll have to have another event. Epstein Group's actually applied to the JUST program when we're going through it. So it's definitely been an interesting and very enlightening process, and we're excited to be a part of it.
When LEED first started, I think it was obviously focused towards commercial buildings. Do you feel like the materials credits that are within the Living Building Challenge are also going to be able to be applied to residential products as well as commercial?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit about so LEED. Yeah, I mean the first iteration of the LEED rating system, new construction, was supposed to be just your basic office building, and obviously there's a lot of different types of rating systems now that have all spun off that. Living Building Challenge, because of the way that the Living Building Challenge is set up is two parts. So first of all, you don't pick and choose credits. All of the different credits that you see are imperative. So if you're going to go for full challenge certification, you have to meet and achieve all of them. The second part is that it's actually, what's the word I'm looking for? Performance-based. Sorry, took a second. So you don't just submit a bunch of documentation that says this is how we're designing our building, and we're going to put our our parking spaces here for carpool, van pool, et cetera. It's the building has to be operating, and you actually have to prove that you are performing based on what the challenge expects. So especially if it's net zero or net positive water, energy, those types of things. So you have to prove that you're getting there. I think because of these different aspects, a lot of the projects that have actually gone through the Living Building Challenge are actually residential. I'm assuming it's because the net positive and or net zero, I'm sorry, I keep saying both. Living Building Challenge version 2.1 was net zero. Now we're at net positive. Basically, I think it's a lot easier to kind of assume what your demands are going to be for both water and energy. Pick and choose which products you want to use, and everything's on a much smaller scale. I think the Bullitt Center gets a lot of attention because it's pretty much the first office building that's hopefully going to be operational with multiple tenants. So obviously, especially if you're a core and shell project, you can't guess what types of tenants are going to be coming in, what types of work they're going to be doing, how much energy they're going to use, how much water they're going to use, especially if you start including retail spaces. It's just, there's a lot of different things to take into consideration. But I think, it's it's obviously possible. I think some of the other projects are schools, smaller buildings, some research facilities. Trying to think. Yeah, some smaller office buildings, like some government facilities. I think Rochelle was saying one in Guam, which if you can imagine, I assume that in Guam you probably have to get your water from somewhere and your energy from somewhere anyway. So, at that point it's like, well, why not try a living building challenge? Because we're gonna have to create our energy and collect our water anyway. So again, thank you guys so much for coming. I know today the weather is terrible. And it's freezing cold, and it's probably just even colder now than it was when you guys first came in here. So hopefully everybody stays warm and safe on their ride home. Again, please fill out the sign-in sheet. Let us know if you're interested in hearing more. Please definitely let us know if you're interested in joining us, because we have a lot of information to share with people and a lot to do, and it's only February. And I only have 2 events scheduled so far, and we really want to get some more scheduled. So definitely please join us. And other than that, have a great evening. And thank you again to our sponsors, everybody, to our different speakers today. Please give them a nice round of applause.